you don't want to change the game. I think you just want to build the airplanes too. I feel like nothing gets announced until we're in the early 2030s, and I feel like it's a late 2030ish.
This is the Time on Wing podcast. Welcome back. I'm Courtney Miller with Visual Approach Analytics. With me, Garrick Deschavon of Collateral Verifications. Garrick, who are we talking to today?
Today we have the pleasure of speaking with George Ferguson, which I'm sure most of you will recognize the name. George is currently a senior analyst in aerospace, defense, and airline research for Bloomberg. Prior to that, he was a senior investment analyst at BlackRock, and he was also a military intelligence officer in the U.S. Army Reserves. He was a director at FSL. He was VP for Dresdner Kleinwort. He is a CFA charter holder and a private pilot, which I didn't realize that. He's got a BA in economics from Penn State University and an MBA from Rutgers Business School. So it's going to be fun. He's always got some great comments. He tracks the industry and all facets of it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So George, this is your time on wing.
Just a quick intermission to pay the bills, then we'll get you back to the podcast. You've probably heard of Visual Approach Analytics. Here's what we do. Visual Approach delivers contrarian data analysis on the commercial aviation industry. Subscribers can start with our industry analysis and weekly insights, and then upgrade to access our downloadable charts and visualize market trends. And even white label our charts in your own branding. If you need a white paper, a custom presentation with novel contrarian insights for your investors, or your board members, or your boss, yeah, we do that. Our objective is not to be the thought leaders in aviation. Our objective is to give you the tools to be one. VisualApproach.io. Check us out. Okay, back to the show.
So George, thank you very much for joining us today. We've known you for some time, and we're certainly looking forward to our discussion today. As we do with all of our guests, we'd love to hear kind of how you got your start in aviation. Where did the interest come from so that, to get you to where you are today? So I'll let you kind of take it away and let us know.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Garrick made me. I just want to point out that protest.
You must be running low on guests because you decided to have me on. So.
No.
I appreciate it. Look, I have loved aviation since I was a young boy, sadly. So, I was one of those kids that grew up with like a picture of the space shuttle on my wall. If you remember that sort of wallpaper they had out during the day of the shuttle in orbit over the Earth. And so 12 or 13, I went away to camp and start to learn how to fly. I was flying Piper cruisers by the time I was, 17, 18, had a license at 19, tail dragger airplane, a lot of fun. I had a flight instructor. He was an FAA exec. He was working at an iSlip. Great guy. We used to get charged $25 an hour to fly the airplane and nothing for the flight instruction. So
was it a 25 wet or
wow?
Did you add fuel?
Wet.
Wow.
Wet.
25 wet, man. That's...
Well, hold on a second. We didn't ask when this was. This was like nickel gas.
Exactly. I have to do my math here, but
still,
we're talking 85, 86, 87-ish. So we had a Boy Scout Explorer troop in Easton, Pennsylvania, and the Boy Scouts then would let you fly airplanes in those Explorer troops, and a lot of great guys donated their time, including a mechanic that gave a lot of young kids a good opportunity to learn how to fly and get excited about aviation. And it started there and, just kept going. So when I graduated college, I graduated Penn State and I went up and down the recruiter row, begging people to let me fly for a living. I didn't have 20/20 vision, so I couldn't get it done. They put me in as an intel officer, which I guess was almost as good. But, I'd always be sort of looking around for the aviation guys trying to figure out what they're up to. So started early. My career progressed through a lot of different iterations of my professional career, right? So I was a banker, I was doing industrials, even ended up in an insurance group at Dresdner Kleinwort doing a non-bank financial institution insurance analysis and CDOs and things like that were all hot back in the day.
Wait a minute.
did.
That was you?
That's right.
I was trying to blow up the world.
The great for that was you. It oddly makes sense, George.
On the wrong side of The Big Short.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, the wrong. Yeah.
No, I think I actually told one of my PMs we got to get on the right side and short that stuff. But I was at BlackRock for years on global debt and equity fund, and I spent a lot of time on industrials and sometime on the Big Short. And so there I was doing a lot of, Boeing, Spirit Aerosystems. We can invest globally. At its max for when I was there, it was a $70 billion fund, again, global. I really dug in industrials because I loved industrials. And then Bloomberg stood up this aerospace defense research. They stood up an entire research group, right? And I came on to do aerospace defense. And so that's when I got to really totally focus on it. And the joke was, my boss said, the good news is you got the job. You're the air defense senior analyst. He said, but the bad news is you get the airlines too. But it's all fun.
I could think of worse outcomes, but yeah.
It's all fun. Back in the day, I wanted to be an airline pilot, so it was already an area, of inquisitiveness for me, maybe.
And the first step in being an airline pilot is to think you should be running the whole airline, right?
Yeah.
So it works.
How that works, right? You can fly an airplane, so of course I can run an airline. Yeah.
They have a lot of time in their hand up there in the cockpit, so they can always be strategizing.
This is very true. I know this firsthand. I did a lot of that. That's why I sit where I am.
I have good friends that are pilots. They are smart people. A lot of respect for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, they got a lot of time on their hands. So
a lot of time, yeah. Yeah, well, the running joke, and not to stick on this too long, the running joke within pilot circles is great. Congratulations, you're a commercial airline pilot. Now figure out what you want to do with your life.
Exactly.
What do you mean? Everybody has a second career.
Yes. There's
so much. Real estate agent, financial advisor. There's always something to do. Great. So George, I want to know a little bit more about Bloomberg and the work that you're doing on the research side, kind of where I've never really kind of discussed this with you or heard this from you, where the bounds are, what your kind of stated objective is.
Yeah. So, I think we're exploring the bounds every day here. Like I said, 15 years ago, I started as the senior and only aerospace defense and airline analyst. Pretty wide shot group back in the day. Bloomberg has built up a research group that has 2,000 companies under coverage now, and my team has grown, which is nice. And so I have a team of 5 people that work with me, and we cover everything from airlines globally, Latin American, U.S., Canadian, European, Asia Pac airlines, to the public lessors, to all the defense primes in the U.S. and the budding ones in Europe. So we have a pretty large mandate for those 5 people. I think we cover the globe pretty nicely and look at a lot of the ecosystem. And so I think it's been an area of success for Bloomberg. It's not tech, right? So it's not like, we're not covering Microsoft here, but I think we do a really nice job of covering everything from like EETCs, to Boeing and Airbus, to emerging European defense primes. And so it's a nice opportunity. It's a lot of fun, kind of riding herd over a lot of data, and writing the research pieces and watching the developments in the marketplace. Pretty fun.
Yeah, it's pretty broad, right? That's got to keep it interesting because, if one side is a little quieter or slows down, right, the other must be gung-ho, right? Because the money's got to go somewhere. So
you got it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because in the beginning of my career, right, there's not a lot of interest in defense, right? So I've pulled in a couple of guys to help me, manage defense. One more we just added recently, but in early days, nobody really cared that much about defense. I'd go to Europe and nobody wanted to talk defense. So it was really a very U.S.-centric kind of investment and analysis, product. And now, I was just over in Europe. European defense is going crazy, right? Everybody's trying to change restrictions and be able to invest in the space, asking where they should put their money. We're having lots of discussions about emerging companies like Rheinmetall, about some existing, Saabs and Kongsbergs up in Scandinavia. Everybody wants to know, where's the money going to get spent? Europe's going to spend all this money. Where's it going to go? So you're right. There's things that go up and down. Double ETCs were hot during a time where interest rates were lower, and now we get very few double ETC issuances. So things come and go. Double ETCs will be back, I'm sure. We just got to get some lower rates. But it's been very interesting to run the franchise and see. Again, the breadth gives us sort of flexibility to go where the fire's hottest.
Yeah. And the double ETC could come back even without lower rates as long as they stabilize. They just are at those higher rates, but still at less all-in cost for the airlines, I guess. But yeah, that same thing with the ABS market, right, Garrick? I mean, they're kind of the similar types of structures, but that's interesting. Yeah.
And that's something that you guys on the ABS side, right? I think you've started to get into that, right, a bit more.
We have. I mean, as you know, Garrick, we've been talking to you. We're going to put some of your values on the Bloomberg system on double ETCs. We want to go further and go into ABS as well. The double ETCs are great because they're very public type of instruments, right? So I think it works to Bloomberg's advantage because we can provide the prospectus, give you a sense of the aircraft in the deal. We can, a number of those trade via trace, so we can see pricing on those double ETCs. We can give you a current yield to maturity, so you can really get a sense for what the cost is in the public markets to finance some of those airplanes at sort of very understandable loan to values. The ABS gets to be a little more of a private market, and so a little more challenging. We do have a heavy interest in understanding it better because I think it's an important part of the aircraft financing market. Francois Duflo, who works with me, puts out like a semi-annual report on ABS activity that he can see, but we'd like to get even more of that data on the Bloomberg system. We have a bunch of it for double ETCs, and we'd like to expand the ABS stuff.
Yeah, and is that based on kind of client requests that are looking at the space, and that's why they're pushing for that, or what drives kind of you guys looking at something else?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things there, right? I think one sort of Francois covers the lessors as well. It covers Air Lease and Air Gap. I have a guy, Eric Zhu, in Asia that covers BOC. But I mean, I think the ABS structures that become important to sort of managing portfolios at the lessors. And so I think we care because, there are always the potential to sort of put some stuff out of the portfolio into these sidecars or whatever else, ABS structures, and manage portfolios. So we kind of see it as a tool that's important to the lessor community. So that is one. And two is, I would say Bloomberg's biggest user base are fixed income investors, right? The fixed income buy side. That's the absolute strength of the platform. So we always see a lot of interest from Bloomberg subscribers on aircraft values and different debt structures that are financing aircraft. And so I think it just adds to the information we can provide them and help them make better decisions on their investments.
I want to talk about the cycle you were kind of touching on between civil and defense, particularly as it plays to aerospace. How much of the idea being that they're counter-cyclical? When you have one, you don't have the other. And I think you could make the argument, if I'm following that thread, that we're just exiting a very heavy civil, very light defense over the past decade and a half. Well, I guess from prior to 22. Is that true? First of all, is that how you kind of see that cycle? And really the question I'm getting to is, if that is the case, what does the shift to defense mean for civil? What and how long are these cycles? Come on, George, show me your crystal ball here. I I'm really interested because I am very light myself, knowledge-wise, on the defense side, but it directly impacts the civil side.
Yeah, no, I think it will, to increasingly. I think first one of the things we keep thinking about is supply chain, right? I think the supply chain is somewhat interwoven between civil and defense, and the supply chain already seems kind of stretched. From a commercial aerospace perspective, we keep watching Airbus and Boeing trying to ramp up rates and have quality problems, and the engine makers always appear to be an obstacle to get those rates higher. And so I think you're going to see, defense, as we increase defense spending, they're going to jump into that supply chain and try to extract some pieces from that supply chain that I think are going to become difficult because it's already a bit stretched, right? And so
who wins
I'm sorry.
in that tug of war? I don't mean like which company. I mean defense
Or
and civil
commercial.
fighting for supply chain. Granted, it depends on what blows up and where, but why wouldn't defense always get priority in that environment?
Because I think defense, one of the challenges with defense is that a lot of times it's yearly contracts. And so they drop a contract for a year for whatever they need for the following year. And then, the supply base has to weave it into whatever plan they have, where civil will come out or commercial will come out and go, hey, we got, a 9-year backlog for Airbus A320s or 737s. We need you to provide this kind of cadence to, what you're putting into our program. And so civil likes that signal better than they like the annual defense signal, right? I mean, defense will do multi-year sometimes to make it a little bit better, but we all know, to a large degree, defense spending is a function of governments too, right? And governments change, demands change from the governments, and so what we find is that supply chain doesn't want to invest as much for the defense signal because it's so short, and they don't know if it'll go away. So I think who wins is commercial wins, unless defense comes in and again gives more longer-term contracts or provides money for expansion. And so, even some of the casting and forgings folks we've talked to sort of give us the same sense. They're like, look, we got lots of casting and forging capacity. It's just defense jumps in and needs 3 for a year, and then they're surprised at the back end of this. So I think that's one of the big challenges. When I look at them as combined entities, right? You look at a Boeing, and has back in the day had a pretty robust defense business. It's improving, right? We're even seeing today the F-15 got another sort of 21. The request is going to be for another 21 F-15s. It looks like in the 2026 budget doc, which is nice. I mean, the fighter franchise at Boeing looks like it's actually coming back. It's something to get excited about, I think, if you're a Boeing investor. But that defense side really is, I do some sailing for fun. It's kind of like the keel, right? That's a heavy lead keel at the bottom of the sailboat, keeps the sailboat from flipping over. It's the stability to the business. You're never going to wake up, though, and find out that defense is getting above average returns. Things are growing quickly, at least in the U.S. Things are growing quickly, and you're going to have a lot of sort of revenue gains, profit gains. The commercial side is very different, right? You can earn a better return than the defense side, and you can sort of garner a lot of orders, push the supply chain to give you better flow through and crank up build rates and make a bunch of money. So the way I kind of think about it is like, you could become wildly successful on the commercial side. You're never going to do that on the defense side. Right? The Pentagon will watch your budgets. The Pentagon will be trying to balance buys between contractors, so they always have a fair amount of capacity that they think they need in the industrial base. So I think again, it's kind of like there's a stability that's provided by that defense business, and the commercial side is it's the whipped cream and the cherry on top. It's like, that's where we're going to go make great gains and turn a company into a really nice performer from a earnings perspective. And I think Europe just hasn't seen that, right? Airbus, you kind of look at Airbus defense, and it's a bit, it's the weaker side of the business for sure. It's much smaller than Boeing's defense business. It really hasn't been as exciting as U.S. defense business is to date, I think there's probably some opportunity for Airbus now with the extreme increase in spending in Europe, right? And so, sort of even stepping back, Europe is, it looks like, poised to spend 500 billion plus per year on defense. They haven't done this for years. They sort of, haven't really invested well in defense since the fall of the Berlin Wall, I'd argue. And so that's where I think you see more of the stress. It's kind of funny. Boeing's had this stress on their supply chain because of quality and other issues until now. Airbus could find out that their supply chain gets more stressed in the future because Europe is really trying to crank up defense spending. It's an opportunity for Airbus to improve that defense business, but it could be a challenge in the supply chain as you go forward. And Airbus could look a little bit more like Boeing with a decently robust defense business attached to a really nice commercial business. So we'll see.
So I've never said this word on this podcast before, but you can't not now. NATO, right? This is not something we talk about, but the spending requirements in NATO basically are move this kind of money. Like it's kind of backwards in that it's not defense capabilities. It's go spend this amount of money in whatever way classifies as defense. And I'm way outside my element here, but I want to know. I'm looking to understand what classifies as defense. Where could we look to see some of these dollars being spent that maybe are some of the grayer areas that we may not, that are not like munitions or fighter jets or whatever? And how might that, like you were suggesting, take some bandwidth away from the civil sector?
Yes, I mean, so this 5% spending level that they're all sort of pushing for in Europe, I kind of agree with you. Like, it's a lot of push, like, go spend this money. And I think Europe is going to have to come to the point where they say, how do we spend this money in a way that we get capability and not just spend the money on our favorite engineering program inside my country, but we actually build out a defense industry that's pan-Europe, that includes a couple different versions of every type of piece of equipment you need that we can train Europeans on. So there's a lot of work to be done in Europe to, I think, get that cohesiveness and get good bang for the buck in the defense spend. And that becomes part of the risk too, is that they're going to drop a lot of money into supply chains and see a bunch of inflation for maybe some products that they already make. Look, I think initially what Europe needs is they need a pretty credible defense against a land aggressor, let's call it. It looks like Russia, right? And so when we do a bunch of analysis here at Bloomberg, we're kind of straying out of aerospace a little bit, but what we see is an extreme need for things like tanks and artillery pieces, right? And things like that. So we see a lot of spend there. I think air defense becomes a lot of spend as well. More pertinent to the risk in the supply chain is Europe's going to have to figure out what they want to do as they grow their defense industry. If they just want to be a regional blocking power, then maybe they don't need as much aerospace, maybe as many aircraft and things like that. And so maybe the pain on the supply chain, at least for our aerospace folks, Airbus, might be light. But if Europe decides they want to be a power more than a regional power, you could see them wanting to invest in tankers, right? Which would be probably the A330 MRTT, right? We've already seen a couple orders for that out of NATO. It could be good, right? The 330 could use a little more demand, but let's see how much they do. Europe ought to be thinking about 6th generation fighters. So that gets how they get to your heavy industrial base, right? That's going to, again, your castings and forgers, you're going to go down and ask them for structural components. You're going to ask them to be building more engines. That's where I think you're at risk of stepping on some of our aerospace industries. Now, 6th gen is like a 2035 event. It's a stealth fighter. There's a lot of work to be done. I don't think you're stepping on it today. but you could be stepping into the future. Again, MRTT, tanker, I see not a huge amount of demand. I think they got to think about bombers. I think they got to think about tank-killing helicopters. I think they have to think about transports. They're all aircraft. That require some level of engine supply chain and that forging and castings, which again are kind of limiters right now for the industry, right? Especially, I think, forging and castings as you get into engine casings and things like that. And so that's where I kind of see more of the risk in our to our aerospace, commercial aerospace friends. I think the labor force is a very similar labor force too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's a limited labor force, right? And so even in the U.S.,
I couldn't do it, so I'm limited.
I probably couldn't do it either. And I think, it's going to be a U.S. and European, right? Because in the U.S., the Trump administration just went to $1 trillion defense budget, right? And they'll expand, and the buys are aircraft, right? The Trump administration wants aircraft and ships. Ships shouldn't get in our way a lot, although it does go through the castings and forgers. The aircraft do. And so we're going to ramp up the demands on the labor force inside those supply chains too. And, a stable labor force gets you the throughput you need at Boeing and Airbus to do 65 737s and 75 A320s a month. If you lose stability in that, it's really hard to keep, get to those rates and keep those rates. So we'll watch.
Titanium was a buzzword the last couple of years, and that's probably not even the long pole in the tent. I mean, all of the we call them composites, although not carbon composites, but the composite
alloys,
the composite alloys. Thank you.
Yeah.
I would imagine there's all sorts of competition there as well. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, I mean, I actually, that's probably not even the worst of it. I think you hit on labor. We're Europe especially, but the United States is not much better. Just kind of running out of a workforce, right? We're past that peak population boost. That's just general kind of movement in that direction. And then you're going to mandate spend, which is inflationary, to tie up this labor and these materials, which is inflationary, right? That sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean, to me, one of the big challenges we've seen even coming through the pandemic and out was just, I think aerospace lost its sexiness. I don't know what happened, right? When we grew up,
Derek.
It was.
Thanks.
When we grew up, it was like, I just wanted to be a pilot, right? I thought being a pilot was a really cool thing to do, right? Or being involved in the business. It was cutting edge, right? And everybody, I see it in my own kids. Everybody loves tech now, right? It's like, hey, I want to wake up every morning, not go to an office, get up, turn my computer on at 8, and I don't know, program the latest video game or something else. And, everybody loves tech. And I think we got to find a way to tell people, look, we have a cool industry. It's cutting edge. I can, you can go to sleep in Newark and wake up in Paris, France. This is time travel, right?
That's amazing. The problem is you can also go to sleep in Paris and wake up in Newark. So it goes both ways, George.
Come on. Eric and I probably both use the Newark Gateway. And look, once you get out of Newark, it gets green in Connecticut and New Jersey.
It's the Garden State.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's all good.
Yeah, it's all good. But I'd love to touch on, the comment you made about, kind of the commercial space being the whipped cream and cherry on top, right? And based on that, do you see anybody that's on the defense side looking at the civil side, looking at the commercial space going, geez, I don't know, it looks like Boeing has been struggling. Is there an opportunity there? And it's been kind of brought up in terms of, could we see a new player in the commercial space, but that's been in the defense space just based on the fact that they have the experience kind of going after that space? Is that something that you guys think about or you guys look at all?
I don't think so. When I look at the big U.S. defense primes, I think they like their businesses. I think they see commercials less distractive. They were in commercials, some of them, back in the day, the Lockheeds, and I just think they've left that space, and I think they're plenty busy and not looking at it. And I guess the way I kind of see the backdrop right now is that we do have a third competitor coming, and it's Comac. And they're the one that can break into this business because they have the staying power that everybody else does. I feel like the lesson from the Bombardier C series was Boeing and Airbus will absolutely prey on you if they feel like you're getting into the narrow body business. I think Embraer keeps looking at that and going, that was really scary, right? Because they almost lost the whole company. I think they built a great product. I think they're great people, Bombardier, but they almost lost the company. And so I think that's why an Embraer goes, no, I don't want to go there. I think the defense guys see maybe it's a bit crowded, but the Chinese Comac will come and they will have the staying power. And I think they will be the third competitor. Might not fly them everywhere. Might be developing markets in China, but they're coming, and in time they'll be in developing markets too.
And China's a big enough market to make that program successful.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I think that's what people miss. Every time I say, watch out for Comac, they say, there's no way we'll fly Comac in North America. Yeah, you know what? Probably not, but there's still enough. And then take China off the market forecasts for Airbus and Boeing.
Yes.
Right? So what happens there? Now, in the context of all of that, you touched on what I think is the most interesting part of that. In that, back to a 3-horse race, even though kind of east-west, now be the 4th horse by way of Embraer, right? Yeah. Like, wow. You want to talk about, a hurdle. Barrier to entry and just challenge that's it. The commercial aircraft sector is very easy to look at from an analytical perspective, but money is gained and lost from game theory, just to throw around smart sounding terms. But truly, like you said, Boeing and Airbus can just be like, and you don't exist.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when Comac's kind of a big part of that.
I mean, I was in Dubai earlier this year, and they've got plenty of Chinese cars driving around Dubai.
Oh yeah.
Like here in the States, we don't see them as much. In Europe, there's a smattering. But a buddy of mine jumping in a BYD taxi to go somewhere, opened up the door, looked inside. It's pretty nice. They can build it. They'll get there. Mm-hmm. It's going to take some time, but they'll get there. And so, I would not want to be trying to do the 4th wheel inside that business. Boeing and Airbus have a problem. I think figure out how to get the Chinese in to the market, and they're coming, and they'll take part of it.
They will take part of it. By the way, that BYD taxi is not a bucket of bolts. That's a higher quality than what the West is producing. And
could be
whatever. Tesla's the example to use there, right? So the idea that because it comes out of China, it's lower quality does not apply to all industries. And at some point, you could also suggest it's not now. It's they're not there yet. I agree with you, but the trajectory's there. And they've proven that. So you have a mid 2030s 3-horse race.
Agreed. And look, I think that one of the other challenges, right, is that the West is Europe and the US got to figure out, again, if they build quality and they build a good product in time, they think they will, they'll get market space. I think the bigger challenge right now is just, if you've got a Western European or US workforce that gets a lot of benefits and, they get healthcare, they get pensions, they get vacation, is it a level playing field? I think in time, we're going to have to figure that whole thing out if Americans are willing to get on a Comac airplane and fly, or the Europeans are too. But I think, again, they build a good product. It's a lower price point. The question is, do we have to make adjustments because of that? Because you've got Western workforces you don't want to thrash too, right? You got to figure out how to weave this whole thing back together. So, but the Chinese will have staying power.
That's nothing new just in the context of the global economy either, right? I mean, you're describing globalization. That commercial aircraft manufacturing is kind of entering, we're at the very front edge of that. Automobile manufacturing, that was the 70s and 80s, right? I mean, it used to be that Japan was the cheap manufacturing base, way back when.
Yeah.
And that ebbs and flows. So there are plenty of examples for how that may play out. I think the one caveat to all of this is the time that it requires, because it just does take time. I mean, just even in production rates, the airplane exists. Now they'll have an engine issue at some point, so they need to develop a homegrown engine or work with the Russians. But it sure feels geopolitically like there's some sort of inflection point that will happen between now and fulfillment of whatever that is. Whatever that looks like. I don't know anything. He didn't say anything last time we chatted, so I don't know. But there are just a lot of variables at play. By the way, that's not good for anybody. It's not like we're like, hey, all right, great. Things are great on our side. But it's good for the defense side.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we going back to commercial, sort of the secular trend of more consumption of air travel is, what we sort of continue to drive towards, right? Continue to find more demand. It's a great product, right? Again, it's a time saver. And so there's probably a secular demand for more and more and more. So to feather the Chinese into a growing market is probably, it's an easier thing than trying to feather them into a market that's shrinking. So I think that the dynamics for the market, for our market, are great because people want to consume air travel. So it's okay, right? It's not. We'll figure it out.
Okay, in this context, I'll ask the $20 billion question. We're hearing not news, not even rumors, but just kind of early rumblings of Boeing issuing an RFI for engines and Airbus talking about, we might potentially maybe kind of sort of start looking maybe in like the 2030s at the next generation of narrow body. In the context of what we talked about with defense, where the attention is, what's your crystal ball?
I don't know. I mean, the engine manufacturers that I talk to and the noise I hear to them is that GE's talking about 2035 going to an unducted fan. That could be the impetus to building a new airplane. It feels like a big stretch to me, to be really honest. And on the Pratt side, I'm not hearing unducted fan, right? We're hearing sort of an iteration again of the geared turbofan is what sort of the last things I've heard. Yeah, when I talk to some of the companies, some of the folks out of the engine makers privately, especially sort of the Pratt MTU side, I hear things like bigger cores. Sorry, not bigger cores, bigger bypasses, right? More efficient core allows me a bigger bypass, gives me better fuel efficiency. That feels like another iteration of same technology and doesn't feel like the impetus for a brand new narrow body. I've been on the record saying I think Boeing, though, needs something different than what they have, right? Given that they're so squat to the ground, and if we keep increasing bypass sizes, they're going to continue to have problems, right? The max problems was a function.
That was the
of
bypass ratio problem, right?
Yeah, pushing that engine forward. Yeah. So I feel like Boeing needs it. Nobody wants to spend the money. Boeing, right now, what they've got like $89 billion of inventory on their balance sheet that they just need to assemble into airplanes, deliver, and bring the cash home. It feels to me like Boeing's going to be doing that till the end of the decade. So I feel like any development is back half of the 2030s at least. So, I mean, that's my 10 cents. Should Boeing do it? I feel like Boeing has a better incentive to do it right now, because if you're Airbus and you've got 9 years of backlog, you don't want to change the game. I think you just want to build the airplanes too, right? Where Boeing got a smaller backlog and some challenges with the manufacturing process that they're fixing, you could argue that they would be in a better shape to say, let's go to new and let's just change the game here. But again, I feel like first the company was at risk, and now they just have to liquidate inventory, build airplanes, get on with life. And so I feel like nothing gets announced until we're in the early 2030s, and I feel like it's a late 2030ish.
It pains me to say, but I agree with you, George.
Yeah. It's sad because I remember, the heady days of like the Neo when we're booking thousands, 1,000+ orders for narrow bodies at Paris Air Show.
But something is very different now. Like there is something that's very different. And that is, how did I put it on the webinar the other day, Garrick? You have new technology and you have, which replaces reliable technology. That wasn't the case in the mid 10s. It was, we'll hit the same reliability and durability, as Shannon puts it, as we did on the prior stuff, and we'll get 15% fuel burn. Now we know there's some sort of trade-off. So you show up with an unducted fan and you do something really crazy like this, it doesn't mean that people won't jump on it, but probably not as quickly.
Yeah, I think airlines will definitely feel like, hey, show me that it's going to be better than what I'm flying today, right? Before they sign up, because it's kind of like, yeah, we're not signing up for that to have problems again. Like we're not playing that game. So yeah, and I think that's, but and I think I made that comment yesterday. But all it does take is one, right? For somebody to just decide to jump at something, right, for whatever reason, and then all of a sudden everybody else is like, crap, now we got to do something too. So it seems like everybody's very much like, hey, why don't we just, like on the A320 stuff, it's like, well, you know what we've got on the GTF, there's the advantage, right? So there's going to be some improvements there. So that'll be another iteration of that, and that can push things out further. I think, CFM is looking at kind of the same thing. GE is looking at the same thing on the LEAP, right? Trying to put some improvements in there, right? So we can kind of push things out. I don't think I've heard anybody talk about any wide body replacements anytime soon, right? Anybody you talk to, they're like, oh, it's like 2040s. Right, because there's no need for it. It may just be same thing, an iteration of
you could re-engine. You got re-engining left in those too, right? That's the next generation.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, actually, if you wanted to, right? But ostensibly. So that just gets pushed out. But it's definitely it's interesting to see who'll jump first, just to kind of like push the other guy to be like, let's see if they make a mistake.
It's almost like if you're GE, what's the real incentive? You have the majority of the market share, in the narrow body world. Wide body, they're probably pretty darn close, right? I think they might still have majority. Why? Why would you want to, especially when you go back to the unducted fan? Like sometimes I wonder if this is like GE mind games. Like, watch this, we're building an unducted fan.
These are not the ducks you're looking for.
Exactly.
Not the ducks you're looking for.
The pack guys are like, hold on.
Yeah.
Go hire those 10 guys and let's look at the unducted fans. Siphon some money off over here, right?
You remember the Sonic Cruiser?
Yeah.
This feels a lot. Not the Rise engine. I'm just saying the time and where we are. And so there's another element to this. GE, this is definitely the case for GE, and I would say even more so for Airbus. So if you're Airbus, do you take the risk, right? So nobody really knows what the next generation is. They had this fling with hydrogen for a bit, right? And okay, so now they're like, yeah, no, we're gonna do it. Do you take the risk? For what payoff? That's what I don't really get. One of the worst outcomes is that Airbus actually kills Boeing.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Airbus doesn't want that. They need them.
I agree.
They're the Batman and Joker of aviation. They need each other to exist, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're the CEO of Boeing or Airbus, your incentive is to build that backlog.
Yes, that's production.
Yeah. Your incentive is not to spend billions on a development program and come up with the next greatest airplane. That's a gift to the guy that comes after you or the lady that comes after you. Your incentive is you go to the boardroom every day and you go, tell me how we're going to get this supply chain maximized. Tell me how we're going to maximize throughput. I want to deliver airplanes. And I feel like post-pandemic, that's the challenge too, is right. Everybody's going back to like, look, all these great ideas are, they're great. But we can't get the supply chain to perform the way it was even prior to the pandemic. Now we're really back to the blocking and tackling of this business is how do we get the supply chain to work better? And I feel like that's just going to be the overarching theme for years and years to come. is how to get that going.
And from that standpoint, do you get a sense? Do you guys kind of look at supply chain, kind of that whole environment to figure out how is that improving? How is that improving? If not, like, is that something that you focus on at all to kind of get a sense of like, all right, so when Boeing, Airbus tell us that, they're making progress, are they just blowing smoke, or we're seeing it based on this, and this?
We try. It's difficult. It's extremely opaque, right? So, I mean, as you know, the supply chain there's a couple of really big companies that don't let you look inside, right? Safran, RTX, big portions of that supply chain. They're always under the cloaking, maneuver. They're always trying to hide everything that's going on inside there. You probably couldn't figure it out anyways. And then there's a whole bunch of really small shops, right, that you go into. Again, like, I did a forgings and castings sort of mini tour, right? And I was in Wisconsin. I was in Southern California. I'm walking around forging and castings plants trying to figure out. I'm looking at presses that were built in the 1910s and 1920s. So some newer stuff, right? That's like the isothermals. They're $100 million. Built a couple last year, or not last year, but recently. I'm joking last year, and you see them, and you're like, well, what's your throughput? How are things going? And they're like, well, things are great. We have lots of capacity. Oh, that's really cool. Okay, for I think big structural stuff. And then you talk to them about the engines, and they go, well, the engines are a different story, right? So the engines love those isothermals. As near as I can tell, those isothermal presses are sort of state of the art. And you have to get the engine makers to come in and certify, the processes to put new presses in, to have new vendors build them product, right? And I think where I just keep kind of coming back to, and this will be the cloak and dagger side of our discussion, is that,
like cloak and dagger,
I don't think the engine makers really want to put a lot more capacity in, right? The world works exactly as they want it to right now, and their job is to keep it there.
They'll never say it. Never, ever.
Of course not, right? I mean,
but hold on a second. You're telling me you want me to invest money to increase production of engines that I lose money on every time I deliver, so that in the future I can replace them, which, by the way, they replace the engines that I'm charging an arm and a leg to go through shop visits and LLP's tax and all that. There is a perverse incentive to not.
Yep. The last thing you need is aircraft average lives to fall, right? And you never want to be sending airplanes out the door that get torn down really early and end up being in the spare parts store, something like that.
Point of clarification, though, and we just had this conversation yesterday with Shannon Acker. Really, what you're saying is you don't want engine life to fall.
Yeah.
The airframe is different now, and it's the exact same dynamic that's creating that, where the airframe's coming out so that the engines can continue, which is great. But if engine production goes up to replace that, again, they're losing money every time a new engine delivers to an OEM, and it's replacing that downline. I mean, one of the other major benefits of the LEAP and GTF challenges is it just drives super expensive shop visits on CFM 56-7s, V2500s, Dash 5s.
Yep. And somehow a lot of that stuff just not covered under warranty. We don't know why. It just, sorry.
Exactly.
That's right. You do have to change the gear. We said you wouldn't have to, but the gear in the front, you're going to have to change that because we couldn't track it, in terms of how well you're maintaining it. So little things like that, right? And that's how, even though they've paid out quite a bit of money.
Oh, of course.
I think they're making it back up fairly quickly as well.
Well, they will.
Yeah, they will. It's just the timing. It's a timing game, right? They'll get you sooner or later. But yeah, I feel like there's this little dark room at every one of the engine manufacturers with a couple analysts that are under top secret orders not to divulge any of the work they're doing, and they're just trying to figure out how to maximize, the spare parts, the high margin spare parts push. That's my sort of,
which I mean, that's
conspiracy theory.
Their business model was based on that, right? I mean, that's the whole model, except that what they probably didn't think about or didn't realize is that, you built the 7B and well, maybe not the V2500, but at least the 5B, 7B, you built them so well that it took you a really long time to actually make some of that money back. So, don't do that again, but you're still, so you don't want to recreate that to be like, oh my God, we've got this perfect engine. It's going to stay on wing forever. It's like, no. We don't want that. We want stuff that breaks so that you have to spend money. And I don't think that model's changing either, right?
This is the next problem for the single aisle replacement, which is, are the engine OEMs going to stick with that business model? And I would argue they're not. I think they want more on the front end. I think they don't want to push as much to the back end. I think that business model has shown its vulnerabilities to the engine manufacturers. What that means then is the all-in aircraft price is going to have to go up.
Yes.
So to acquire the next generation airplane is going to be more expensive if that is the case, which just makes it that much more difficult to come out. And if you go to airlines right now and you're like, hey man, guess what? New airplane, 15% fuel burn reduction. They're like, fuel burn, like, I get it. I'll take it. Thank you. But that's not my problem right now. My problem right now is, what's that engine going to cost me? Can I get capacity? Can it stay? Yeah, fuel's there, but it's not just the law of, mathematics. Every time we reduce fuel burn, it makes that number smaller. So the absolute improvement gets smaller and smaller. That's just how things work. So at some point, it's not just a drive to fuel burn. And it was last decade.
Part of that, though, I feel is a function, too, of boardroom dynamics at the airlines. Like, if you're an airline that's pushing airplanes through pretty quickly, right? You're like a low cost, just a small low cost airline or a medium sized low cost airline. You just keep getting new. You push stuff out that gets to be 10 or 15 years old, and you're probably getting money up front for taking delivery of the new from your lessors, right? And so you're on this little wheel that you don't want. And so you do like the lower fuel burn, because you're like, look, I don't care what the long-term costs are. I'm going to be in this job for 5 or 7 years. I'm maximizing profits in my 5 or 7 years. And someone else will have to worry about what the back end of this airplane looks like.
You're right. But what enables that are lessors willing to do that?
Yeah. I mean, look,
and they have been, in fairness, right?
Yeah.
You're a big airline. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, lessors have the same problem, right? In terms of, like, you still need to have that throughput. The machine needs to be fed, right? Because when the music stops, right, depreciation kind of catches up. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, that doesn't. So that's why you have to have new airplanes. You have to have, turnover. And so it's kind of everybody's kind of airlines, with the sale leaseback, same concept, right? For trying to, you have to keep that machine going. So I think from that standpoint, as long as you have airlines that are looking to do that, you'll have lessors that are more than happy to do that as well, right? So that's kind of like a self-feeding little environment there, but that, it's been that way for years,
It's all these challenges between sort of the short-term way to maximize profits and the long-term, how do I maximize the company's value for the extended period of time? Again, if you're the Boeing and Airbus CEO, should you be designing and building airplanes and introducing them? Yes. Is it good for the bottom line? No. If you're buying airplanes, should you have the most fuel efficient? I don't know. Maybe if you look at the long-term cost of that engine, maybe not. But I care about the next 3 years, right? And it's just some of those challenges.
I mean, that's the nature of boardrooms and the longevity of a CEO, right?
Exactly.
You can have an amazing CEO that delivers the best 10-year vision and long-term plan, but they still have to survive years 1 through 9.
You got it.
And they don't. By and large, if there's any negative along that line, they don't. And in order for you to get to the positive at year 10, you're probably going to have to take some negative. And that drives, and then welcome to our world, right? I mean, that drives so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess from your side, right, based on all the things that we're talking about, all the things that are going on, right, how do you guys look at, the type of research that you're trying to provide to ultimately help your clients make better decisions, right? How do you think about all this stuff to try to improve things that you're doing?
So I think that, what provides the most value to our clients is always going to find those areas that are gray to very gray to black, and trying to use logic, data points in the marketplace, hints, and trying to turn that black into something that's a little more understandable. Because, look, if companies publish it in their financial statements, the market's full of very smart people. They'll all find that information and they'll act on it. But what the market is always sort of looking for is, there's something out here that I just can't even get our arms around. Help me figure out how to make it a little more understandable and make a bet based on it. And so we go look for that sort of gray and black and try to turn it into something that, we're not always right. I'd like to tell you we're always right. We're not always right. That we at least help our end users, which are full of a lot of people that manage money, helps them at least understand the bets they're making and what we think the ultimate outcome for that bet is going to be. So that's where we really try to focus our research on. We also want to give people a good understanding of all the companies that they own. So there's some basic reports that basically tell them our expectation for the next year or so, next quarter, next year, where things are going. But the most exciting piece is that thematic part where we try to turn black to light gray.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's that little... You're trying to open up that little black box, right, that everybody talks about, and to get a little peek inside, just to see all the little mice running around.
Which I think is the beauty of this, of being an analyst in the aerospace defense business, is there are a lot of black boxes in our business. The engine makers are a big black box, right? Nobody really knows what the numbers are for, hey, like you said, we screwed up the initial, introduction of this engine. It's going to cost us billions to fix. What's the tail on that? What's the tail for spare parts? Mm-hmm. How does it look for the engine maker? How does it look for the airline? Those are hard to... So the beauty of this business is there's plenty of that space to go dig around, try to find. I don't think AI gives it to you. So I don't think you can just AI it out of your way.
Yeah. So
that's the fun of the business.
That's job security for us.
Yeah.
It's the same thing on the appraisal side, right? There's no database. There's no readily available data where you just kind of like, oh, we just know what everything's selling for all the time, and like I say, AI doesn't necessarily, if you try to do that, you get some kind of coherent answer, but you're like, yeah, that's not right though. Yeah. So, it doesn't capture the nuances. So that's good for us.
Agreed. The beauty of our space is we could dig around, talk to everybody, figure out what's really, not what's really going on, but we have a space where it's small enough that I think you have a group of people that are talking to each other, bouncing ideas off each other, right? So I don't know, the auto analyst may not find that it's, that he can see the whole ecosystem like we can see the ecosystem. I love that we can get into, into functions together, like an ISTAT function. You got lessors over here, manufacturers over here, analysts over here, appraisers over there, and everybody's just sort of bouncing their ideas of the world off each other. And we know each other, we play the game together, we're having a good time, and there's a little bit of intrigue in the middle of that. It's fun. Yeah. I think it's a great business.
Nobody has all the answers. That's the thing, right? So when you hear somebody else that has something interesting, you're like, ooh, I like that, right? I'm gonna remember that.
Yeah.
Right. Hopefully you have some stuff that people are like, oh, I didn't realize that, right? And that's how kind of what drives everybody's interest in aviation and hopefully keeps the industry moving forward.
Agreed.
It's okay because I just asked AI where I should invest in commercial aviation. And here's what it told me. It gave me five. It gave me five answers. Number one, aircraft leasing, and it calls it the strongest opportunity. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. It's more of a value argument. Number two, any guesses?
Engine makers.
Starts with an E and ends with VTOL and other scams.
Wow.
Sorry. I did. Seriously, it does. That's number two. Number three, SAF. Maybe.
Wow.
I truly don't know.
Okay.
Wow.
Number four, MROs. Again, like that one. So we're you know what? If you're an investor shooting for 50%, and actually the fifth one is I did not expect. And knowing me, just sounds like I may have influenced the AI somehow. It says regional aviation.
Wow.
That's pretty specific. Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
To pick on to pick that up out of the whole sector. So 50%. I'll give it 50%.
Yeah. So 50-50.
We got job security.
You could ask AI on where you should invest, or you could have equally good returns by flipping a coin.
Yeah. Probably. Well, a good asset manager gets like 60% of their calls, right?
That 10% matters.
It's hard, yeah.
That's called edge.
Yeah.
All you need is 51 and you're the house.
Or luck. Edge or luck. I don't know.
Well, I'd rather have that.
That's right, yeah.
It's hard.
Those are both good, yeah. So, but actually, and it's interesting you talk about AI. I feel like, it's certainly something that is talked about all the time, right? And I think you feel like companies are definitely trying to incorporate some level of AI into their products, right? How do you guys look at that, right? Trying to take some of the, whatever brain power, whatever, is you're able to use from AI, incorporate that into your stuff. Is that something that you look at all, or how do you look at that?
So, I think Bloomberg is experimenting with AI and how it can help us write research and things like that. And so, I will admit to you that I'm doing, I think, probably the least of it in the office. So I'm just a believer sitting down and hammering out myself. And so, but I could tell you that, we have things like earnings previews and things like that where I can put in a bunch of bullet points and AI will start to write for me. And I know some of my colleagues have used it. They say it's okay. I'm always a little scared of the answer that you just got for where to invest in aviation, right? I guess I've been doing this long enough. I think I know where what the challenges and opportunities are in each of these subsectors. I know what I think about the different companies. I don't believe that AI can do it for me yet, and so I just kind of I knock it out on my own. But I will say all around Bloomberg that we're messing with AI, right? You get a news, you pick up a news report on Bloomberg now, and they'll give you the AI summary in the top, right? And I think they're probably doing it. Some of our research, I could tell you transcripts. AI digs through the transcripts and gives you what they think the most important thing is.
It is a great summarizer, by the way. Yeah. It is very effective at a summarizer, which, by the way, George, you should not be spending your time summarizing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You should be generating. And that's what let me share with you something I did today. It's a little insurance policy against AI. I'm making up words and slipping them into my writing so people know it's not AI. And then if I start seeing the AI use those words, I know they're taking my stuff. So just make things up, George.
Sounds good.
I mean, that's what we do all the time.
What words like if, and but?
Yeah. I was talking. I turned like propensity, like for propensity to travel, I think into a verb somehow, like propensitified, like whatever. Just made up words, right? There's no way the AI is going to do that. But I find, look, I mean, I am in AI all the time. Most people think of like ChatGPT as AI. That's a very small part of the AI industry, but I think something in particular to this, and that is not being discussed now, it's a very long-term trend, is AI is an amazing tool for guys like George, who have the base, not just the base knowledge, the deep industry experience to do some of the summarizing work, the lower work, right? Do that math. The problem is that the people who used to do that are the ones that become George.
Exactly. And
there's this almost, a gap 10, 20 years from now where the world isn't going to be able. George, you're irreplaceable. That's what I'm saying here. You're irreplaceable. But I'm hearing so much about this, people talking about, whoa, AI is such a great thing. And the people who are saying that by and large are the ones who already have the knowledge on how to do it. And AI is making it faster for them. But that knowledge is required. Understanding the framework, how the business works, what to pick, what not to pick. But we are hollowing out that group that's coming up that's how they learn those things. We haven't solved that yet. So I think you're safe, George, for now.
I agree. I think all of us will be on the beach, in retirement with a cocktail when any of the problems with AI finally come to roost. The challenge will be the folks that are behind us.
But hold on, in that scenario, then they're calling us up, trying to pay us a premium to come back and fix. See, it's all wins.
It's a win-win. Yeah.
AI can write our contract, our consulting contract for us,
right,
so that we don't have to hire an attorney.
How do I maximize the benefit to me? Yeah, it's definitely.
I ask ChatGPT that every day. How do I maximize the benefit to me?
And it says, just use me.
In everything.
Yeah. In all, yeah.
All-encompassing solution.
George, I do want to talk a bit about Paris, the air show.
Okay. Yeah.
You were there. I mean, just give me let me put out a hypothetical. If you were an effective AI summarizing agent, how would you summarize the Paris Air Show?
Maybe I'm not an effective AI agent, but anyway.
Yeah, even better.
Look, I think it was a show that had some slightly better order flow, I think, than Farnborough last year. So I think it confirmed a bit of momentum in the business, especially since Boeing wasn't there and wasn't booking orders. I suspect Boeing couldn't have booked many orders because I think the tariff overhang is still on it. And so
they front loaded some of that too with the Trump visits to the Middle East and those big orders.
Yeah, agreed. And we actually expect Boeing to get some pretty decent orders this year because we think that there's a catch up they've got to do on Airbus still. And as the Trump administration goes around and negotiates trade deals, my guess is that airplanes could be an interesting way to balance out sort of trade.
Big numbers.
But yeah, I mean, I think Boeing's pullout, GE's pullout after the unfortunate crash of Air India definitely took some of the steam out of the show, out of Paris. And I think a little bit of the defense, business, the fact that the U.S. is really pushing Europe to spend more on defense. I also feel like it kind of created I think some of our European friends are kind of, they still love us, but they're a little bit, they're trying to figure out where the relationship is. Maybe we're all kind of dancing around each other a little bit because of that too. So to me, I think those events kind of took a bit of the power out of Paris Air Show this year. So
Facebook would call the relationship, it's complicated.
Yeah.
I think that's the official term for it.
Perhaps a bit strained as we ask for more.
The defense side of the air shows, again, that's something I pay attention to. Is Farnborough and Paris and Le Bourget, do they have kind of the same mix between civil and defense, or is one more than the other?
Oh, so I think that typically defense had taken a little bit of a lower key, right? I think the challenge of defense is you don't get the orders right now, right? So you I think everybody loves to roll into town. I'm a low cost airline out of wherever, right? I roll into town, negotiate with Boeing and Airbus, go down and have some nice dinners in Paris, and I walk out of town. The day I leave, I place an order for 200 narrow bodies. I'm the star of the show, and this is a blast. But we all walk around the shows and we see the delegations of militaries going from chalet to chalet discussing things, and so they're working on that stuff, but they don't announce it at the show. So I think it always takes a little bit of a lower level. It's a lower vibe, maybe is the right way to put it. And I feel like in years past, Paris maybe was a little more international of a show, and Farnborough was a little more of a US, UK kind of show from, I think, a defense perspective. It's changing now, I think, with the Russian war in Ukraine, aggression in Ukraine. And so I think that defense is still important. You might not find the variety that you might have, found in the past at the Paris Air Show because of that change in dynamic. But I think it's still, there's some big chalets of defense manufacturers that again have lots of people coming and going. So I think it's a very important part of the show. Maybe one we'll pay a little more attention to in the future, but I think it's but again, maybe not as splashy and glitzy as the commercial side.
What happens to the air shows if one of the major OEMs just stops playing?
I mean, I wonder, again, the last couple of shows have not been, big sort of, big order flow kind of events. And Boeing did seem to take some of the oomph out of this. And Boeing really doesn't have a home show. If you could argue that a home show would be a U.S. show, Boeing doesn't really have a home show. I don't know. Again, I feel like post-pandemic, we're in an industry that pre-pandemic, it was the Neo and the Max. It was the 787 and the A350, new products, splashy, orders, excitement. Post-pandemic, we might really just be that industry that's like supply chain. Build them, go build them, build more. That might mean the show is a little less exuberant.
That's where the value is right now.
In supply chain?
It's in supply chain. It's in production. It's not in necessarily designing new airplanes. And
yeah. I mean, go
ahead, George.
You get on that, you go to Le Bourget, we all stay downtown in Paris, right? Usually, so you get on the train, you get up there, you get to the train station, and you get that little bus that takes you from the train station to the show, and it's full of people. And, as a guy that focuses on orders and the big OEMs, you're like, who are all these people? And then you walk through all of the halls and you see all of those people, right? And they're from Europe and they're from Asia and they're from the US and they're making a little widget this big, right? They put in every 7. There's a lot of people like that, and the show matters to them. So the show will still matter from that perspective. But, the exciting 100 order, 200 order, narrow bodies, per order, 1,000 for the show. We might not see that for a while.
And how valuable, I mean, you could also argue that the big orders that we saw kind of during the 2010s from the air show wasn't necessarily just because of the value brought to the OEMs, but the airlines wanted to be seen. I mean, you kind of mentioned that. Do they even want to be seen doing? I mean, times are different now. I think of Lion Air. They wanted all the airplanes. Like they wanted to have the biggest, and they had the largest order in history at the time. And now there's no push to grow. I mean, in their defense, it kind of looks like they grew up a little bit. And it's not about the optics. It's about actually running an airline. I just use them as an example, but that seems to be more the case today than everybody who just wanted to talk about how their emerging middle class is flying and look, we've got all the airplanes type of thing.
Yeah. I think that sort of the U.S. and European airlines, you really don't see them typically order much at the show. They're not usually the splashy buyers. You find those splashy buyers out of other parts of the world. Again, like you said, like they roll into the show, have multiple hundreds, be the airline of the hour, bring all the stewardesses, or bring a little group of the stewardesses in too, and stewards, I guess, and, do a big picture on an airplane. It seems like that's something that's not Europe, US centric. And I think that those parts of the world too, maybe have plenty of orders right now. And so that will diminish the value of the show too, from an order perspective. But again, there's a lot of jockeying around the corridors of those halls going, what can you guys, how's your supply chain doing? What can you provide to me? Can you give me this component or that component cheaper, blah, blah, blah. There's an underside of that show that I think we don't, we focused on the bigger OEMs and manufacturers. I think we don't see, and I think it still matters, but it may not be the exciting show for orders.
Yeah. Now, George, do you guys follow the business aviation side of the industry as well?
Yeah, we do.
How is that different from commercial or defense? Or, I mean, because I know it's been, I think that side of the business has been very strong for probably close to the last 10 plus years. But, is that still strong? Is that changing? I follow it a little bit, but not enough to talk about it intelligently.
What he really wants to know, is it affecting the price of your G5?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I wish I had a G5. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that industry really bounced well after, during the pandemic. And I guess it's like, it's a drug, right? It's like, I talked to some of the helicopter guys too, right? Because we cover the helicopter manufacturers too. I have this problem, like I love anything that flies. And so even some of those helicopter businesses won't turn the needle at at Leonardo and Airbus. I still like to follow them. I think they're fun because if it flies, I'm chasing it. It's a problem. So the helicopter guys, you always talk to them and they go, helicopters are like a drug. They're like, we turn people on to the drug. First, they're scared. Then we turn them on to the drug and we go, look, you don't have to get off your BizJet at San Tropez Airport and take a taxi to your yacht. Exactly. You could get in a helicopter and be on your yacht. And they said at first, people all those things crash. I'm scared. Right? And they say you do it twice and they go, I got to have one of these. I got to have this. And that's the way biz aviation is, right? And so coming out of the pandemic, or during the pandemic, there were people that got turned on to biz aviation, or private aviation is probably the better moniker, that hadn't used it but were wealthy enough to use it. I mean, the statistics are out there that there's a lot of people that are wealthy enough to use private aviation but just don't, right? They'd fly first class or whatever, and Delta was okay. We turned them on to private and they went, wow, we love it. And private demand took off. Now it's coming back down slowly, but a lot of those people, they didn't leave right away, or maybe they cut back a little bit of flying here and there. So the trend has been kind of easing down. It's not falling off a cliff, it's easing down. And I think the BizJet makers, if you look like, before the global financial crisis, they would crank up production, deliver jets, then you'd have excess in the marketplace, prices would fall, there'd be problems. They can't get supply chain either right now. Right? You're Airbus and you're going, I need you to build something for me for a jet that I want to make 65 to 75 of in a couple of years. If you're a BizJet maker, you're like, hey, we're going to build 30 of these next year. Can you make? And the supply guy's like, I can't even see you. Right? I don't know. I understand what you're saying. 30 a year, right? So they're having a problem. So that's keeping that contained. And I think the BizJet market has done pretty well because of that. It's never going to be narrow body land or wide body land, but it's done okay. And I'll tell you, as an analyst, the real big challenge is then you got to get in to figure out who's got the better BizJet or doesn't. And that's like saying, Kirk, do you like the Cadillac Escalade better than the Porsche 911, right? And it's all a function of your tastes.
Yeah,
so I got to figure out what your taste. Exactly. I need a bigger garage. I need 4 or 5 of all kinds of things, right?
That's right. Yeah, one of each.
Unfortunately, in BizJet world, or in private aviation, I guess they get too expensive to have more than, unless you're super rich, a couple of them. But the challenge is figuring out, where the demand is ebbing and flowing the most to. And right now, again, it feels like at the lower end, it's probably ebbing a little bit more. At the upper end, apparently there's always demand for a really nice Gulfstream They're really nice.
Yes, for $80 to $100 million jets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Car analogy is lost on me, though. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying like a 2012 Civic or a 2008 Ford Ranger, right? Is this kind of the...
Yeah, no.
Just trying to put it back into my...
Yeah, no.
Derek's neighborhood, they're driving around 911s and, the big BMWs.
I'm close to Westport, so yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
It's all,
hey, look,
it's all
I'm
about
in
who's got
Texas.
what.
We've got, now the big thing is the $90,000 Cybertruck that we're trying to get rid of. So yeah, we see
a lot of
that
those
as well. Yeah,
a lot of those things about driving around.
And is the business jet? You kind of alluded to this, but are we seeing material competition for the supply chain? I mean, I know the priority clearly rests with the commercial guys in that respect. Is that materially limiting the production and therefore increasing values of business aircraft?
I think it's definitely, capping production. We hear the biz jet makers tell us that, there's some models they can't get up because of a supply chain challenge here and there. So we know, we see it sort of rears its head at different places. Values aren't coming down, but they're just not, I think they're not rising as much, right? We work with some of the folks that are in the business that do remarketing, and they're probably as close as you get to a real sort of an appraiser or something like that inside the business. And for a while, just immediately post-pandemic, right, it was these biz jets wouldn't even get on the broader market, right? They'd be, a broker would get it and they'd be selling a biz jet and they'd let their friends know, and their friends would be like, okay, we'll take that one. Don't go anywhere with that. And the next bid was always higher. We're not in that market anymore. And so we kind of watch the secondary market to get a sense for it. We're not in that market anymore. Have we fallen off a cliff? No. I think like a lot of asset markets, the rising tide lifted every asset, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there's a shortage, so everything's worth more all of a sudden. And now with the tide, maybe at high tide and starting to fall a little bit, there's some assets that people are like, no, I don't know that we have a bid for that, right? Or the bid's lower. But the good assets, like everything in life, right? The good assets, like houses in Garrick's neighborhood, someone's always ready to bid up. Good assets.
Yeah, good assets is right.
Sorry, Garrick, I don't mean to give you.
No, it's quite all right. It's all right. Yeah. Which, by the way, actually, there's somebody else that's, overbidding next door. Yeah, I think everybody's got that problem these days around here. Yeah. It's like there's not enough houses. So
how many times? How
many times have we been interrupted on this podcast because somebody's knocking at the door wanting to give you money? Like, yeah, it happens all the time in your neighborhood.
Every day. I just, I get so many emails and pamphlets and somebody's trying to buy my house. Yeah. Which the funny thing is like, great, where am I supposed to go? If I'll take the money, but where should I go? Then pay more for same house.
I get those calls where someone says, do you own this lot in Bisbee, Arizona? I'm like, what?
Say yes, George. Yeah.
We'd like to make you know. I'm like, what? This is some sort of scam. I just don't understand how it works. So like,
no, it's a scam on the guy who actually owns it.
Do I understand it? Do I say no? I don't know. Where's Bisbee?
Yeah. Well, look, George, this has been really fun.
I enjoyed it.
It's definitely we definitely covered a lot of the spectrum of aviation, which is great, and I'm sure our fans will certainly appreciate that. But it's always fun to chat with you about aviation, and so it's been nice to get to know you a little bit more over the years, which known of you for some time, but it's been nice to get a little closer as well. So we appreciate taking the time to talk to us today, and hopefully you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks a lot for having me. Always fun to be with you two guys. Always a good time.
Thank you very much, George. Can we just talk about Scott Daniels? What a stud.
Scott Daniels.
I'll bet he thought we wouldn't do that.